This is ABC15 Mornings.
Who could forget these images of a raging fire in downtown Phoenix? This morning, we have new information about a possible suspect in that massive fire that happened about a week ago.
And you've heard his name from protesters for the last 2 weeks now. A spark of hope for Deon Johnson's family as an investigation has now been opened by the FBI.
Also, we are on wildfire watch this morning. One fire burning over 6,000 acres, now impacting the Grand Canyon National Park. This as fire weather alerts go into effect this weekend. And on that note, we say good morning, Arizona. So glad that you're waking up with us. I'm Nohelani Graff.
And I'm Mark Thompson, working from home this morning. And Nohe, on my walk yesterday, it was just about 100 degrees, but there was a slight breeze blowing, so it made it a little bit more bearable. Not good for my remote control airplanes, but good to help me stay just a little bit cooler in this hot weather. Not good for fires either, though, the wind.
No, I tell you what, those remote control airplanes are going to be grounded today because the breezes are going to get even stronger. They do offer just a little bit of relief, but you said it, for fire danger, it really increases. So a live look right now from our South Mountain camera, and you can see we do have a few clouds out there. It is a little hazy this morning. Right now the temperature at Phoenix Sky Harbor 80 degrees, so we've dropped just a little bit, and our winds are blowing around 7 miles an hour here in the valley. That will increase later this afternoon. After 2 o'clock, we'll really see it pick up here in the valley, 10 to 15 miles an hour, with gusts up to 25 miles an hour in some spots around the valley. Across northern Arizona, downright windy conditions. 20 to 35 mile an hour winds with gusts upwards of 45 miles an hour. And that is increasing our fire danger statewide, but we do have fire weather alerts in effect across northern Arizona. So we're going to talk about that coming up in your most accurate forecast.
All right, Nohe, thank you. And this morning, we want to get right to new details about this massive fire at an apartment complex under construction in downtown Phoenix. Police telling us late last night that they've made an arrest related to the fire that broke out near 7th Avenue and Grant almost 1 week ago. Our sources at the Phoenix Fire Department also telling us that they have video showing a man throwing a Molotov cocktail at that construction site. Investigators, they did develop probable cause to make an arrest of 54-year-old Ted Hopkins, and he was booked last night on several charges, including arson.
New for you this morning, serious injuries reported after a 3-car crash in Phoenix. This happened overnight on Cactus and 51st Avenue. You just saw that one car tipped over on its side, and then these 2 other vehicles with heavy front end damage. So it's clear that this was a violent wreck. We are working to get any more information right now regarding any injuries and how this might have happened. Also unfolding overnight, 2 Valley Fire Departments coming together to stop a hay fire from reaching nearby buildings. Flames breaking out just before midnight near 75th Street and Buckeye Road. Officials tell us about 75 bales of hay were involved here. And when that happens, they can burn for a long time. It can smolder, and they kind of just have to let it burn out as best they can. Good news here, we haven't learned of any injuries. The cause of that hay fire, though, still under investigation.
And this morning, a Peoria police officer is recovering after being hit by a car. Now, this all started last night. That crash setting off a pursuit that ended in a crash. It happened near the Loop 101 and Glendale. This all started in a Ross's parking lot when the officer, he tried to speak with that driver, but then things escalated from there. We're told that that officer does have some very serious injuries, but is expected to survive.
Just one day after his funeral, we are finding out that the FBI is now involved in the investigation into the death of Deon Johnson, a state trooper shooting and killing the Valley man on Memorial Day. His death, one of the reasons many protesters have told us they continue to march through Valley streets. Here's ABC 15's Nicole Valdez.
His death rocked the valley. And every day for the last 2 weeks, those that march the streets shout his name in unison. Friday's march following an emotional final goodbye.
Dad, we got so much pain.
To the man whose death his family knows too little about.
You could have been anything and anybody you wanted to He was so smart, so loving, so intelligent.
But just hours later, a spark of hope. The FBI confirming they, along with the U.S. Attorney's Office in Arizona and the Department of Justice, plan to review Deon Johnson's death for potential federal civil rights violations.
Should this man be dead, sleeping in his car on the highway, there's still a lot of questions.
Friday's march started with a conversation with leaders like State Representative Reginald Boulding.
Anytime that you have a man shot in the stomach, laying on the ground, handcuffed, and you have within 100 yards an ambulance that can save that man's life, and they don't, that's something that has to be looked at.
No justice, no peace.
And like Boulding, some call it progress.
Sometimes we need outside entities to correct the mistakes that the police departments and cities are making.
But others,
I'll believe it when I see it.
Still skeptical, to say the least.
I would like to be hopeful, but as a young black woman in 2020, still having to sweat in 109 degrees, when this probably should have ended with my grandparents, unfortunately, I'm not as optimistic.
And for that reason and many others,
I can't breathe.
These protests likely to continue.
Black Lives Matter.
Nicole Valdez, ABC 15, Arizona.
Nicole, thanks. Now, protests remaining peaceful lately, nothing like we saw 2 weeks ago in Scottsdale when looters caused damage at Fashion Square. Last night, Scottsdale police still cracking down, announcing another 8 arrests in connection with those break-ins. And we're learning some of those arrested are teenagers. That brings the total to 34 people now taken into custody, and police are still working to identify any others involved.
This is about solidarity. This is about us mob coming together. This is about recognition of our people that have passed away, their families that have suffered, their families that are still suffering.
Protests against police brutality and racial injustice also continue around the world. Thousands of people attending Black Lives Matter protests, activists marching on the streets or gathering in public parks carrying posters and signs promoting an anti-racism movement. And back in the United States, protesters in Florida shutting down several highways demanding the defunding of the Miami Police Department for the investment in communities of color. Streets shut down in downtown Miami, the same scenes playing out across several cities in the United States from coast to coast. Demonstrators in California also demonstrating, but taking a different approach. Hundreds of people in San Jose staging a sit-in in front of their mayor's house. Their goal was to show that they are serious about demilitarizing the police force in honor of George Floyd and all of the others who have lost their lives to police brutality.
Time now 6:08 on this Saturday, and we are on wildfire watch. Right now, the north rim of the Grand Canyon is shut down because of a fire that is burning near the park. You can see that big plume of smoke there in this photo, courtesy of the Grand Canyon National Park Service. The Magnum fire has burned more than 6,000 acres already. At the moment, the south rim is still open. And in the Tucson area, a new evacuation order issued just last night for those living near the Bighorn fire. This notice was announced just hours after a previous evacuation order had just been lifted. The fire burning 8,900 acres, and it is still just 10% contained. Now back here on the mountaintops here in the valley, if you want to get a hike in, you have got to be extremely careful because we are going to be very hot once again today, and our fire danger is extremely high. So be very careful. Notice where you're parking. Don't park on grass. Don't throw any cigarette butts out the window. If you want to hike, the morning is the better time to do it. Comfortable temperatures by midday, though we're in the low 100s, and even as we get closer to sunrise, we will have cooled down a little bit, but we are still going to be in the low 100s. Our fire danger is very high, though, across northern Arizona, where it will be very windy from Flagstaff to Sedona and even in Payson. Clear skies up north, so it will be a pretty day, but you're going to need to hang on to those hats as we will see gusts upwards of 40 miles an hour in many of those northern Arizona cities. I'm going to talk about the timing of the winds, when they'll pick up across the rim and here in the valley. That's coming up in that full forecast.
No, hey, thank you. 6:09 now on your Saturday morning. Still ahead, a months-long search for a pair of missing children comes to a tragic halt. How one Idaho Falls community is now coming together to honor their lives.
We are tracking breaking news this morning as police in San Antonio are searching for a shooter who opened fire after he was denied entry into a bar. 8 people have been hurt. Officials say they are all in stable condition. The shooter and several other people, we're told, that they were told they couldn't enter the bar because they were intoxicated. The shooter allegedly told people he was a UFC fighter from California. So right now investigators are reviewing their surveillance footage to try and identify that suspect.
And a vigil was held last night in Idaho Falls for Tylee, Ryan, and Joshua Vallow. Their bodies were discovered in the property of Chad Daybell earlier this week. The children had been missing since September. The investigation ultimately leading to law enforcement digging into the spot on Daybell's property where he held a massive bonfire earlier in the year. Members of the community spoke at the vigil expressing empathy for the family of 17-year-old Tylee and 8-year-old JJ. JJ and Tylee's mother and stepfather remain in jail this morning, both on a $1 million bail. Daybell currently faces charges of destroying evidence and concealing human remains. His wife, Lori Vallow, the children's mother, faces charges related to child abandonment. Neither parent have been charged in those deaths of their children at this time. Their cause of death has not been determined yet. And this came as a really big surprise to many. The Trump administration finalizing regulations that get rid of certain health care protections for transgender people. Now, the Trump administration overturned the Obama-era regulations that protected sex discrimination in health care. Friday's action is certain to be challenged in court by LGBTQ groups and others. The policy shift means that sex discrimination protections will be enforced according to a person's biological sex. It was announced yesterday on the 4-year anniversary of the massacre at a gay nightclub in Orlando and in the middle of Pride Month. About 1.5 million Americans identify as transgender.
Coming up on 6:15 on this Saturday morning, let's get you that most accurate forecast. We do have a hot weekend ahead, but it's a nice looking one anyway. Live view of Camelback Mountain. We've got a few clouds keeping it a little comfortable this morning, but that's not going to last for long, so enjoy it while you can. We're in the mid 60s in Wickenburg. We've also got the low 70s in Santan Valley and Apache Junction, upper 70s in Tempe, Glendale, and Scottsdale right now. So these are the better hours of the day because we are going to be warming up pretty rapidly here. By 10 a.m., we're in the low 90s. We're hitting triple digits at lunchtime. So by 2, we're at 102 degrees and getting closer to that peak heat of the day right around 4 o'clock. Also, notice the breezes. Calm breezes this morning, but you can see how they start to build in the second half of the day. After 2 o'clock, we're around 10 miles an hour and getting closer to 15 miles an hour in that 6 o'clock hour here in the valley. Our air quality, you are going to notice there is a haze out there this morning, especially if you're going for a hike. You'll see it as you look toward the downtown areas. But this afternoon, our air quality will actually be in the moderate range. So here's a look at those high temperatures city by city. The warmest spots, Maricopa and Chandler, topping out at 108 today, falling just short of that at 107 in Mesa and Ahwatukee, 106 in Goodyear, Laveen, as well as Scottsdale and Apache Junction. And our Northern Valley cities staying in the low 100s today, places like Cave Creek, Anthem, Carefree, you might not even crack the triple digits. Across the state right now, we're sitting in the upper 40s in Prescott. We're already at 70 in Sedona. We're in the 70s in the Colorado River Valley and down in Yuma as well. But look at the warm up. We'll hit triple digits across central and southern Arizona. 103 in Safford, warmer in Casa Grande at 107, low 100s in Yuma and coming close to triple digits along the Colorado River Valley. Up in the Verde Valley area, we're looking at the upper 80s and low 90s. And then north of the rim, you'll find cooler conditions up in Flagstaff at 79 degrees, but we're in the 80s in Window Rock, Heber, and Show Low this afternoon. The big thing that you will notice across the high country today, very strong winds. It could make travel difficult, especially if you're going along the I-40 today. So we do have a wind advisory in effect across northern Arizona, north of the rim until 7 o'clock this evening. So here's how it times out. You start noticing those breezes around 20 miles an hour as early as 9 o'clock this morning across the high country. They really start to build around 2 o'clock, and that's when we'll notice our breezes pick up here in the valley. Our winds start to swell closer to 5, 6 o'clock, and they're really strong across the high country at that point, with gusts upwards of 45 miles an hour possible. And then the winds will die down statewide overnight. Now, our temperatures here in the valley staying warm, but we're pretty much on par for the average for this time of year, which would be 104. So a high of 106 today, through the rest of the weekend, and even to start the work week is what we expect to see for this time of year. So at least we're glad that we're not above the average. But we are getting warmer by Tuesday at 107. So I'll give you a look at who wins out, the lower temperatures or the higher ones in that 7-day forecast. Plus, we've got to talk about that wildfire danger some more. That's coming up a little bit later this morning, Mark.
No, hey, thanks. 6:17 now on your Saturday morning. Coming up, it's a big election year, but things are going to be a lot different this year. What changes you can expect at the polls?
Seemingly overnight, the campaign signs have gone up on just about every corner around the valley, and there are some notable changes to our elections process this year. So Maricopa County Recorder Adrian Fontes is joining us this morning to talk about it. Adrian, thank you so much for giving us your time.
Thanks for having me, and happy to talk about this.
So I do want to ask, with all of the push for social justice that we've seen over the last couple of weeks, the protests, one big thing that everybody keeps saying, you've got to get out and vote. Do you anticipate a higher voter turnout this year, especially in those city elections?
You know, we've been planning for a higher turnout in 2020, even before any of the COVID-19 concerns or any of the other political or social justice concerns that have emerged. And we had a pretty robust plan moving into the season. January, February, we were making a lot of plans. Obviously, in March, we had to make some major adjustments very quickly. The new model, however, has given us an opportunity to really look carefully at how it is that we're going to make things happen better for voters. And I would argue that we're going to have the single most accessible election in the history of Maricopa County, even with the added turnout that we're expecting.
So let's talk about accessibility, because we are going to have the option to vote by mail. This has been a hot button issue nationwide. So what's that going to look like in Maricopa County?
Well, the ballot by mail process is already very, very robust. In fact, in the general election in 2018, we had something like a little over 80% of our total vote was by mail. So that's not unusual for Maricopa County voters. But the folks who decide to go vote in person, of which we're going to hope folks do, they're not just going to have one polling place on one day or the expanded 40 vote centers as we've had in the past. All of the polling places this time around will be vote centers, so you can go to any of them. Moreover, we're going to expand early voting up to 2 weeks prior to Election Day at least 50 of those locations, if not more, including nights and weekends. And all of this is to give voters more options. So I've been working very closely with the Board of Supervisors, with the county manager's office, with county health officials, with the county real estate department, even going out, acquiring places where we will be able to house plenty of voters indoors, not outside in the heat in lines, plenty of social distancing, and a lot of robust choices for folks to make plenty of time ahead so that we can have good, healthy turnout for the 2020 primary and general election.
That's a really important change that you're making, that people can cast their ballot anywhere, that it's no longer a designated area. Talk to me also about what Election Day is going to look like itself. If you do decide to go in person, it's going to look a little bit different because of COVID-19.
Right. Well, Arizona's got 27 days of early voting and always has. The thing is, we hear, from folks in the media, and the traditional conversation is around Election Day. And we've expanded that a little bit. Now we're expanding it a lot more. And so what is it going to look like when you get to a location? Many of our locations are going to be at places that are very, very familiar. We won't announce specifics until we've got ink on paper on those contracts. But they're going to be very large venues that people are very familiar with. They will have plenty of space indoors to stand 6 feet apart, plenty of social distancing, lots of PPE, cleaning materials, lots of signage, and really a lot more poll workers to help our folks stay safe if they decide that their option is to go vote in person. Obviously, we're going to be asking folks to continue to sign up for an early ballot, whether it's just this year or to the permanent early vote list, because that's going to make things a lot easier for everybody across the board. But if folks want to come vote in person, absolutely, we want to make that option available.
And you talked about PPE, and there are some things that there are points of contact that people typically share when they're casting their ballot, pens. I hear that you've made a little change to that, and also gloves.
Yeah, we're going to be announcing all of the specific processes as we move forward and get those plans out there public. I don't want to mix up any details right now, but we will be communicating very clearly with voters about the safeguards that we're taking, because look, it's just not the voters that we're protecting. We've got our own staff that's with us permanently, many of whom have been working for decades in the office. We've got our poll workers, a lot of whom have come forward and said, look, I want to participate, even though they know that there's a little bit of a higher chance for exposure, but they want to get out there. We're providing the training, the equipment, and the safer environment than what we have seen in other places. And so Maricopa County Recorder's Office and Elections Department, together with the recorder, myself, and the board, we're all working together with county and other health officials to make sure that we do it, and we do it right for Maricopa County voters.
So let's tell everybody to get their phone calendars up. You've got some important dates that you want everybody to pay attention to.
Absolutely, and I've got them pulled up over here on another screen. The last day to register to vote in the August 4th primary, not for the fall. The August 4th primary, last day to register is July the 6th. So 2 days after Independence Day is the last day to register. We'll start mailing ballots out on July the 8th, and that's 27 days prior to Election Day. The last day to request a ballot to be sent to you is at the end of July, the 24th. And the last day to put it in the mail, also in July, that's the 29th. That's about 6 days before the August 4th election day. And again, very robust early voting. All vote centers, you can vote at any location we've got set up. We'll be putting more information out there, so we hope folks pay attention.
And on that note, I do want to point out that you are very active on social media. You have been providing links for anybody who's still concerned about the vote by mail process. And I also want to acknowledge that you put it out in both English and Spanish so that we reach everyone in the community. Adrian Fontes, Maricopa County Recorder, thank you so much for talking about this, such a critical topic for everybody to know, and we really appreciate your time.
It's my pleasure, and it's my honor to serve, and I hope the voters understand it's important to get out and vote. Our democracy depends on you.